Good morning, everybody. Hope we're all doing well. Welcome back to more CSGO news. As always, my name is Jake. I hope you guys all enjoyed today's episode. Some crazy stories over this past weekend, and hopefully you all had safe weekends. Thank you to all of you guys who stopped by actually on Saturday and watched my episode with the anonymous cheat maker that made the cheat that was exploited over the past couple of weeks. I will link the video down below if you guys did miss it, but this past weekend was absolutely insane. There will be several videos out today about this. This, of course, covering CSGO things. I'll show you guys some clips on and throughout, and we'll break down IEM Sydney in the back half of the episode. Some small things did happen out there, the first of which I do want to touch on, that being the own TSM president, Lena. We've talked about her before and their hints about a potential CSGO roster. She did tweet out this actually last Friday. I was unfortunately not here in the office when she did tweet it out, but apparently some big things coming to TSM. Now, obviously, many of us know, formerly it was actually them being in talks with Big Smuya, and they're also in talks with Tarek and other players as well. Tarek has obviously signed with Team NRG, so things might have fallen through. We also had a couple weeks back, it was Lena talking about the investment for a CSGO team is very extensive, but now some more hints, potential hints. We also had Smuya reply to this tweet itself and say it was an obvious bait. Now, I do want to say my first thought was actually probably going to be a Fortnite announcement. Of course, we'll have to wait and make sure and clarify whether it's going to be for a CSGO team finally coming to TSM, or if this will be more of a lackluster announcement that does not revolve around CSGO whatsoever. But the hints are out there, and some big things could be coming to TSM. Let's just cross our fingers as CSGO fans that it's almost time for the team to return. And finally, it's also Cloud9 getting rid of Rambo, apparently from their coaching role. It'll be Valens to return to the roster, and I don't think I'm very surprised about this. You guys probably not as well, especially the struggles ever since, not even when he joined, the team in general struggling, and of course, mostly I'd say across the players, and of course the inconsistent roster changes over the past 5 months. Their troubles have been pretty apparent to all of us out there, so Valens will now return, and as he returns that coaching role, it will be for the brand new roster. So a Cloud9 coaching change, and of course several roster changes over the past few months. They continue to make changes, and hopefully these will be the changes set for our next major run, as Cloud9 will approach that very slowly, and we're going to see where this team goes, because we all know the struggles they have seen so far. So a coaching change, not a huge surprise, and hopefully a step back in the right direction with the old coach now returning in Valens. Now, also on top of that, some very controversial news out there. It's actually Complexity taking the rebrand strategy of that of Dignitas. If you guys remember, it was a while back now. Dignitas, they rebranded their OG logo into the new Dignitas Owl logo. Huge backlash about this because they are one of the OG orgs out there, right? An org you always recognize that little alien head about. They rebranded to a random owl, which is apparently a retro version of their logo anyway, but now it's Complexity, a bit of a rebrand, but also a bit of a sellout.
We are players first and players always.
This is our movement.
Our culture.
Our time.
This is our game.
And I knew once I saw Jason Lake with the blue tie, because if you guys somehow did not know, Jason Lake iconically has always been wearing the red tie for the old Complexity logo, and they have now rebranded to the Star, obvious kind of representation of the Dallas Star, which is their sister company. And so it seemed like this probably was a forced hand. I ultimately probably think I'd like to think if Jason had the ultimate choice and was not forced into this, he would have liked to keep that OG Complexity logo, and we will likely never see it again. So it's very unfortunate. I would say I don't think any rebrands out there are necessarily going to go over very well. At least we have seen very, very few of them, especially when you take some of the iconic, some of the historical images like Dignitas and Complexity, and you change them to these things that just don't make sense to me. So kind of I would say a sad news out there. I don't really appreciate it. I don't really like it, but I guess we'll have to get used to it because it's the future Complexity logo. And then very lastly, in super small news you guys might not even care about, but either way, I want to announce that Bad News Bears have a brand new member. That's going to be that of Ye. Ye was actually filling in for Ince, the Brazilian squad, last week. Now he's joining Bad News Bears. I can't imagine it's going to be a full-time role, probably trying to impress some more competitive teams out there, but definitely an interesting signing for them, as he'll be replacing Skylar on that roster, a guy I continue to feel very bad for. If you guys kind of followed Skylar's story, he was really kind of forced into some roles over at E United and then forced out of that roster eventually, and he's now forced out of this roster as well by their new member, Ye. So we'll see what this future roster does. Not a huge signing, but either way, guys, now we get into the big story out there. So so many storylines around this, that being IEM Sydney this past weekend. If you guys did not watch it, go back and watch it. It was an amazing event. I couldn't watch every single map, but for once, a final best of 5 where I actually thoroughly enjoyed it, and viewership-wise as well, the event it did very well. It beat out ESL Cologne, it beat out IEM Chicago, and that was without an Australian team making the playoffs. That was without Astralis at the event altogether. If you guys watched it, even just watching the crowd in itself, it was a great event. It made me want to go to a CSGO event, and yet again, back-to-back years of just amazing IEM Sydney events, and I hope it's an event that continues to happen on and on throughout the future of CSGO. But of course, I got to share some storylines about the event. There were so many great matchups, great series, along with that, even some great sketches brought on by the event itself. You know, there were several Australian teams there, along with them, the best representing ones being, of course, Renegades and Greyhound. Greyhound only making it a little bit less further than Renegades did, but either way, a great sketch by the one, the only Big DickStacy. If you guys did not somehow see this, and HenryG, he's scary.
Girth out of control. There's definitely no sock underneath that either. That is all, man. Little late to the party, but Australia's better late than never. And oh, here we go. Here we go. He's gonna do it to him. He's gonna take it off. Who is this? It's DickStacy!
And then along with that, it was actually some drama. Taco, I don't know I'm really curious what you guys think about this. Taco is becoming almost the FNX of the Brazilian scene. You know, the JW beef, now is beef with Niko. Apparently they are not friends. According to Niko, they had their back and forth on Twitter because, of course, FaZe, if you guys were not aware, had Niko not at the event, the entire event. He was first expected to make it a day late, then 2 days late, and then actually to miss the entire event. And FaZe did suffer in that regard with Yanko actually filling in. I still think, you know, some pretty, some stronger moments from him, some weaker ones as well, but you can only expect so much from a coach. Either way, FaZe Clan, of course, without Niko are going to struggle. That was not a surprise, but their back and forth Twitter banter, really, Taco, yeah, so apparently those two are clearly not friends anymore. And of all the teams out there, I think Renegades probably had one of the weaker runs as well. They were actually swept in both their matchups, NIP and Mouse, but you really can't argue against that. You know, NIP has been looking in some better form than they have over the past, probably in 2018. On top of that, you know, they still have been showing up quite well. On top of that, being swept by a Mouse Sports that is still certainly on the come up, and a Mouse Sports that also had a very interesting event themselves. Then you have a team like MIBR, who again is definitely a playoff team, right? Consistently making playoffs. That further step though, making it past the quarters and into a grand finals has been their struggling point, but they looked very strong opening up against Fnatic. Then they got rolled by NRG in a very close series against the Mouse Sports, which we'll talk about very shortly next. A series that I bet on Mouse Sports because I think they really could have taken them down. A team who was certainly learning a lot of things out there in that series, although a 2-0 sweep, some very, very close engagements there, and I think some turning points that Mouse Sports can certainly take advantage of if they learn from their mistakes as they continue to grow as a roster, and a very impressive roster at that. And then you got NRG. Yes, they take down a FaZe without a Niko, and it was still actually a relatively very close 2 maps against that weakened FaZe Clan roster on top of that, but still NRG a pretty solid run. You know, they show up later, they take down MIBR, they take Fnatic to a map 3 as well in a somewhat close series. So NRG for me, you know, it's really nice to see some other North American teams besides Liquid at least making some strong runs against some European teams. Now, speaking of European teams, Fnatic definitely having probably the most interesting event as well. You know, not showing up very early on. I'd say pretty much struggling out in their opening matchup as well. Besides that, though, they go to the lower bracket. They take down 2 of the arguably weaker teams. You take down a team like Chiefs and Greyhound, and they both go to map 3, but I don't think they're necessarily a very close series. And then you take Fnatic to a playoffs where you really weren't sure what to expect out of them. They take down NIP, and they take down NRG, and they make a grand final after an opening appearance where I really was not sure what roster would actually show up. It is very nice to see now for consistency that Fnatic is certainly here in 2019, and they are back with a vengeance with this roster who only has 2 long-term signed players, but they got to be making Brawl and Twist feeling very comfortable because making a grand final for me, for Fnatic, has to be a huge win. And in that grand finals, yes, spoilers, I've been spoiling it probably the entire video so far. This grand finals, I told you guys before on Twitter, I never like best of 5s. I usually lose map interest over game 3 or after game 3 as well, but this was a very back and forth series. Yes, at times not very close maps. I'd say overall, you know, for some some people out there, I would not blame you to say an anticlimactic series, but either way, for a team like Liquid to break their curse in this fashion against a rising Fnatic team who is somehow trying to return to an old form with a new roster, and a team that many people thought was going to be making roster changes as well during this year, but they have been reinforcing their players and saying we're going to keep this roster, and especially for our next major, I hope they keep this roster because they have showed so much promise. But for a team like Liquid to break their grand final curse like this, to only drop maps in the grand final, they swept everyone they played until the grand final. Twist, rightfully so, earning his MVP, but the entire roster, making NA very proud here. It goes to the grand final. It goes in that best of 5 to map 5, and yes, not a very, very close map 5, but either way, an immaculate way for Liquid to finally break that curse. Without Astralis here, I think we had a very fun event, and I'm glad to see that people out there are saying, and we now recognize, as we probably knew before, Liquid has established themselves as our clear-cut number 2. Yes, the gap between number 1 and number 2 might be far, but the equal gap is still there between number 2 and everyone else. It was a pretty close series, obviously going to map 5, but Liquid was clearing away, to me, the other best team at this event, besides, of course, Astralis not being there, and it's very nice to see. Yes, a European team might be on top, but a North American team is certainly closing the gap as Astralis continue to miss the big events. As always, hope you guys all enjoy. I'll be back here later on with more esports news out there, because some crazy things did happen across a bunch of esports events this past weekend, especially with the crowds taking their part. As always, my name is Jake. I hope you guys all enjoy. I will see you back here tomorrow with more CSGO news, and until then, take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon.